All right, here we are. So welcome everybody. My name is Zach Hilton and I'm a Gilroy City Council member. And today in this town hall, you're gonna be hearing about the digital divide. This group has worked a long time since last summer. Some grassroots stuff has happened. There's been some state bills that have been introduced. And collectively we came together and drafted a letter. And this letter we've been using to write as letters of support to some state bills that address the digital divide. So you're going to be hearing from different people from around the region right now. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Arpinder. She's one of my student interns, and she's going to be facilitating this talk. We're going to do a one round through, and then we'll have time for the audience to be able to jump in and ask questions, and then we'll do another second round. So I'll turn it over to you, Arpinder.
Thank you, Zach. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Arpinder. I'm currently a rising junior at Gilroy's GECA, and I will be reading the letter that Briana Villareal, who is also here today, and I worked hard to draft with the help of everyone from the team. In the light of the pandemic and the need for quick adaptation, many community members, including seniors, students of all ages, and citizens at large have been left behind due to California's failure in allocating necessary resources. This past year, there has been a heavy reliance on the internet and technology because of COVID-19. Despite the rising need of these resources, they remain absent in the homes of too many citizens. In this new way of life, students are forced into distance learning, employees of all different fields are working remotely, and businesses have been rushed online in order to remain afloat. According to a recent Little Hoover Commission report, an estimated 2.3 million Californians do not have broadband access, and this figure does not include those who have limited access to the necessary bandwidth. Over 2 million people are struggling to keep up with society's expectations of performing as we did before the global pandemic. Despite the scarcity of stable internet connection, these 2 million people are held to the same standards as those who are privileged enough to have these resources. Students have been expected to maintain their grades and participate in online classes despite their disadvantage. In the spring of 2020, students were sent home with Chromebooks from their school districts along with hotspots for connection, but many of these attempts had failed. The hotspot connections were often faulty, and it was their only option to connect with their teachers. Enrollment for the spring semester at Gavilan College had declined 22% due to the pandemic, a big reason being lack of technology and internet. Many students and families were living in the Gilroy-Ocoa Migrant Center, and they did not have stable internet connection. By the time this was noticed, these families had already migrated to their next location. California is turning a blind eye on these hardworking students, and these are only a few of the many examples. Those applying for jobs were also not given a fair advantage. Many people are suffering equity and home environment issues, leaving them at this disadvantage. Interviews and resumes are happening online rather than in person. The need for broadbands has become crucial for equity. The internet providers under the California Public Utilities Commission, the CPUC, have been waving off their responsibilities as the main providers, furthering the digital divide. The general public is limited to highlighting the faults of these broadband providers due to their protection under the CPUC. When the CPUC was asked how they would support consumers, low-income and rural Californians, specifically during this time of need, they responded with, "The PUC intends to vigorously enforce the anti-discrimination rules and build out requirements of the DIVCA to ensure that the digital divide is narrowed in California." Despite announcing their plans to support Californians, they have not fulfilled these needs. After a year of waiting for these promises to be filled, they remain empty. We ask for the following actions of the California Public Utilities Commission. We ask that you ensure the infrastructure of the City Franchise Award winners support all students and residents during this time of the digital divide. We ask that you establish criteria to build out free public Wi-Fi to access public services. Thank you. Like I said, this letter was drafted by a peer of mine and I, Briana, who is going to be speaking next. Briana is a classmate of mine and one of my very good friends. She's very insightful. And as a student during the digital divide, both of us have seen firsthand some of the negative effects and impacts that this digital divide has had on students specifically. So Briana, take it away.
Thank you, Arpinder, and I'd like to start off by saying thank you to everyone who worked so hard to make this happen. I'd like to give a special thanks to Arpinder, who I collaborated with writing this digital divide letter. And as she mentioned, I'm currently a student at GECA here in Gilroy, so I will use this time to highlight one of the many issues that I've seen firsthand in the past year as a result of this digital divide. A few days ago, when I went to drop off my textbooks, I saw that there are designated parking spaces where students could park to attend their classes with internet access provided by the district. This is a wonderful effort from the school, but it is unfortunate we have had to come to this. Students should not be having to attend classes from a parking lot during a global pandemic. It is not fair to them in any way. The district made an effort to put hotspots for students, but these efforts were mostly ineffective. I witnessed my peers struggle with unstable internet connections in Zoom classes more times than I can count. They were constantly dropping in and out of classes and vocalizing how they could not hear the teacher and how they were having internet issues. It took away their time from learning, and they missed majority of the lesson because of something they had no control over. This immediately puts those students at a disadvantage compared to the students who could pay to have stable internet. At this point, students are being separated by their financial status, even though all students are supposed to be treated equally despite their family's financial situation. I speak on behalf of the students who have been forced online when I say we are struggling. It was necessary for the CPUC to step up during this time of need, and because they failed to do so, my peers are facing the consequences. To be completely honest, I had no idea the extent of this issue before becoming a part of this team and meeting these wonderful people. After educating myself on this issue, I am now aware of the hundreds of community members who have been so heavily impacted by the digital divide. I hope that by the end of this town hall, the digital divide will become a topic that is made aware to the public and makes an effort to educate themselves on, so we can do everything in our power to support these students and countless of other community members in this time of need. Thank you all.
Thank you for that insightful information, Brianna. She mentioned how a lot of the students are struggling and even gave examples. This has been going on for the past year, and students are just one piece of the community that is struggling. Next up, we have Miss Claudia Rossi, who is the president of the Santa Clara County Board of Education. Thank you, Claudia.
Thank you very much. I would like to begin my remarks in Spanish. Quiero dar voz a las tantas familias que en esta pandemia han arriesgado sus vidas para servir a nuestra comunidad, que no han recibido esa misma consideración de las autoridades que podrían solucionar el problema de falta de acceso a información básica y a lo que se debe considerar una utilidad esencial, como es la electricidad, como es el agua, como es el gas. Yo particularmente como latina, como enfermera que sirve a tantas familias aquí, en particular en el Condado del Sur, quiero decir que los líderes que están aquí presentes sienten el dolor, estamos indignados que a estas alturas y viviendo donde vivimos, esta solución no se haya encontrado. Como enfermera vi que nuestros doctores están ofreciendo citas que se llaman telehealth, que no pudieron accesar nuestras familias porque no tienen acceso a una computadora, o si tienen la computadora no tienen acceso al internet. Esto es más que un lujo. Esto es algo que conecta a las comunidades con servicios de salud, con información en tiempos de emergencia, y nosotros nos unimos con una voz para decir que estas diferencias entre el acceso que tienen ciertas comunidades y el acceso que se les niega a comunidades que aquí representamos no se debe permitir más. Basta. Es hora que solucionamos este problema porque es un derecho básico como es la electricidad y el agua. Y gracias por permitirme esta plataforma. Thank you, Zach.
Thank you so much, Claudia, for those powerful words. Next up, we have Andrea Nicolette, who is the Executive Director of the Mount Madonna YMCA and a community advocate.
Hi, everybody. Glad to be here. I wanted to talk for just a couple of minutes and give you my perspective on what I experienced over this time we've been in COVID regarding our seniors and the struggles that they've had from our senior center. It's life-threatening not to have access to the internet for them. There's no way for them to have medical management. There's no way for them to have socialization. There's no way for them to have even a connection just to their own family. In fact, it was hard for us to connect with them. There was door-to-door needs to go door to door to get them to come to get their own vaccinations because we couldn't reach them any other way. So from my heart, I'm saying this is such a need. I did see it as well with our youth in the community in both Morgan Hill and Gilroy struggling, not being able to get onto an internet to just get their own education, to be around other kids, the mental health problems that we had with the youth, not have anyone to talk to. Again, we had to do efforts as in meetup groups and send things out to different ways to get to them and go to the apartment complexes and be there to meet with the students in the apartment complexes that didn't have internet access. And I mean, the families are choosing between groceries and an $80 bill for internet service. And in some cases, in order to stream quickly, it's a $200 bill for internet broadband service. It's not cheap. And Gilroy only has, they don't have I'm not super familiar with all of it, but they don't have the fiber optics in Gilroy right now. Currently it's DSL and I think cable. That's all that they're providing in Gilroy. So the cost is outrageous. And you're talking about a lot of families that they lost their jobs or they couldn't continue, doing this. So then the suffering part on the other side is their children are not getting educated properly. And that just isn't right. So anyway, I'm here and I have a lot of passion behind this because I want to see a change happen and I want to be able to be part of that solution any way that I can. I just know that the efforts that we did were very minimal and it was door to door and that's terrible right now. So.
Thank you, Andrea, for that insight on the seniors. That is definitely something we need, and it's such a problem, and it's a problem that's been here for the past year. And I appreciate your effort going door to door. I know that's not easy, so thank you for making that effort when there was lack thereof in the community. Next up, we have Ms. Carla Torres, who is also another powerful community advocate. Thank you for being here, Ms. Torres.
Thank you. Buenas tardes a todos. Y sí, voy a tratar de hacerlo rápido en inglés y en español. Lo que aprendimos este año de la pandemia es que sí, el internet es una necesidad básica para todos. Aprendimos que los que más fueron afectados fueron las familias que nos ayudan, ¿verdad? Que trabajan día y noche en el campo y que ayudan a cosechar, ¿verdad? Lo que necesitamos. Y esas familias, específicamente lo que supimos en agosto fue que las familias en Ochoa Camp, y nomás porque fuimos a visitar y a ayudar, nos dijeron que no tenían acceso, unos no tenían computadora y unos no tenían los hotspots. Y lo que aquí la compañera habló de los hotspots, no todos los hotspots trabajaban, sino eran, por falta de mejor palabra, chafa, no era buena calidad. Y aprendimos también, como la compañera dijo, que hay ciertos cables que no están establecidos en la ciudad. En todo de Gilroy, Morgan Hill y hasta San José aprendimos que hay lugares que no hay estos cables para el internet. Y estas son las cosas que tenemos que arreglar, ¿verdad? Como aquí gente que trata de ayudar a la comunidad y diciéndole a los que tienen poder, internet, el servicio de internet tiene que ser para todos, tiene que ser accesible. Ese es el mensaje. So aquí estamos para servirles y voy a decirlo en inglés. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. One of the things that we learned after this, when the pandemic hit, was first of all, we knew that inequities existed. Hello, but it was highlighted even more with the lack of internet, with the hotspots that were not very good hotspots, with the fact that there is not, like you said, the fiber optic cables that need to be in our rural Gilroy, Morgan Hill, and even San Jose areas, by the way, we learned. And other Bay Area cities, we also learned when Blanca, Rosanna, and myself were contacting people in the Bay Area, we learned that even Oakland, San Francisco, you know, there were people, if you were low income, good luck, right? These inequities have been there, but they were highlighted even more. And so specifically back in August, we found out by chance, because we visited to do offer some help at the Ochoa camp in Gilroy, we found out from families that guess what? They didn't have computers, they didn't have Wi-Fi, the schools had not contacted them, they didn't have space to study. These inequities that they have had were completely exaggerated in August. Some of these families had to move back to Arizona because their local school district could not provide them the basic for their education. So these are those inequities that we need to keep fighting for. And I think the other learning lessons is that when the families are not present and those who are in power and in positions of offering basic education, if you don't see these families, go look for them. Find out where they are, just like you did. I applaud you, Andrea, for going door to door. That's what needs to happen. Where are these families? Why are they not coming and showing up? So we are here trying to advocate for that voice that sometimes is afraid to come forward, but they are essential, and we need to make sure that internet access is available to all. Thank you.
Thank you, Carla, especially for that insight about the Ochoa camps. I think that's something so important. Imagine having to move states because your community could not provide you and your kids with the resources needed for education. Education is something that US is known to be accessible for, and inequities were highlighted, and that's just another level of not okay. Next up, we have Dr. Blanca Gordo, who is a community advocate. Thank you for being here, and take it away.
Can you hear me? Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here with all of you today, and congratulations, especially to the youth, taking on the leadership, talking to the people that are making decisions that are affecting your life and any prospect for mobility, you know, not just for you, but for all the young Latinos who have yet to come to terms with the fact that it is not them that is preventing themselves with, you know, exercising their right for autonomy through their education. Okay, so thank you for that, and thank you to all the leaders too. I appreciate you too are rising to the challenge of clearly what needs to happen is revolutionizing this area where you live into the ideal community that that you want it to be, and to do so with a determination to start from right where you're at, right where we're at with what we got. And for me, this means building the community mechanism that is going to has been dealing with the institutional shortfalls, because as everyone has outlined, perhaps it's being discovered, perhaps it's being discovered, but it's very well known that in this case, it is not a matter of resources. Gilroy, we know, is a very competitive agricultural area in the 5th largest economy of the world, at the center, the rural area, at the center of the Silicon Valley. The problem is not resources, you know, and yet we have too many households, over 100,000 if we apply the national rates that the National Telecommunications and Information Administration has reported on continuously since the 90s. This is a pattern that we're very well aware of. There is an empirical record that shows actual proof that we have an inequality in ownership of the very technologies that enable participation in the society, and as most are experiencing, is continuously, increasingly required to engage socially, to receive information about how to protect yourselves. There's a problem in Santa Clara, I see, with the lack of access to vaccinations for the people who are dying, the essential workers, particularly the people who are feeding us, like Gilroy. Yeah, they don't have it. Why not? This is poverty. There's a clear need. All one got to do is look at the built environment. I want to get my order. I got to get an app. to get there, even if I'm there. I need to get access to the vaccination because the billboard says it's available now. Or somebody, alguien, told me that it's on Facebook and that my young people cannot get a vaccination, yet you have to go online. There's a disconnect. It doesn't make sense, right? So we do have an accounting. What requires here is a pause, a conversation, a listening to the people. And I'm going to speak in English because I'm speaking on behalf of the people who have spoken to me since I have studied this. So this is talking to your leadership because no, this has not been happening in the year. It has happened and it has never been a luxury so long as the internet has entered the public realm. Okay, so we do have a problem here. And what requires is our creativity, our imagination, and our all-knowing that we need to create learning spaces that provide what the difference is here. As simple as the infrastructure, normally Wi-Fi, because that comes and goes. That's the disruption. And what problem is, we evaluate students. What we ought to see right now is the creativity and the great lengths that young people have already been going through up to this point, because this is not new. The technology has already been integrated into the learning process. The only division here we have is an acceleration of this problem, where our students have yet to even have the keys to enter, the functionality to show up. Our students are not dropping out. They have been kept from the mechanism that enables learning and job searching and such. So I just want to say thank you for taking it seriously. Talking to the people who are regulating this. And Mr. Councilman Hilton, thank you. Thank you for opening up this space and allowing us to speak before you, with you, because the longer we wait, the worse that it gets. We're not just missing, this only matters because it matters in this environment. It is required. And as I understand, you want this to maintain the development trajectory, great. We just want to be able to enable that. And people who are disconnected are unable to meet the efficiency, the cost savings, the time savings, the productivity, and the profit making of the people who make the machine run, because they're disconnected, and yet they are working for them. Okay? So they are precisely the disconnected who have yet to hear information. Not only do they not have information directly because they don't even have the devices to connect or to log in, but they're disconnected by third, seventh hand. I don't know. The news has yet to arrive. Okay, but we're letting you know that this problem continues and can only take the Gilroy society down. As we remember, not long ago, there was a very violent act in the middle of a festival of Ajos, right? There were people who died. There's social disorder. So long as there's not an actual opportunity to have the basics, to be able to participate. What is needed here is a technical and a social, institutional infrastructure that enables like a community-led, a community-rooted, a community structured technology development center that facilitates entry into that very steep, hopefully, learning curve, but probably very shallow learning curve, because that's how much and how long we have kept people from entering the basic components that is required for social engagement, for economic production, for consumption, for exchange, making it very difficult for all of us. So I'm all here about, this is not just an adjustment of giving some hotspot. That's great. Always welcome when there's nothing else. But enough is enough. We need the foundational infrastructures that will facilitate this goal, as you call it, closing the digital divide, which is really about the difference between those who are able to participate and prosper in the society. At stake is autonomy. At stake is the opportunity for mobility. and at stake is, well, it is known. We will lose what our counterparts already have an advantage. And the problem is only acceleration of the people, precisely because we have more, that the disconnected have less. And that's what I like to show you. I do have some numbers, but we can forward a report for you. And I believe the Comité de Justicia will put it up on their website, because we have applied statistical public data released through the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, based on a sample of the US Census, the Community Population Survey. And these were then to derive national adoption rates of broadband and computer ownership. And because of the confidentiality and lack of data points at the detail level, I then went ahead and applied these American Community Survey General Abstract that is collected, 5-year sample that is collected by the US Census to create a credible, statistically and valid estimate of how many households have been disconnected 8-9 years ago. That's just to give you a show of the pattern that continues. You could definitely apply those for Gilroy should you need it. But I think it's very clear by the numbers that we should expect, and as the young people continuously inform us, and I'm sure your constituency will continue to knock the door to let you know, they can't even enter this website, this discussion, because, you know, it's not easy. We have to remember the people who are teaching that it is harder than we think it is. We've embodied this experience, we've been socialized into it. And the people who have yet to connect, that it is easier than they've been told, easier than they think they can't. So somehow we have to meet in the middle. And thank you for allowing me to speak a little longer. I appreciate you.
No, thank you, Ms. Blanca Gordo. You mentioned so many great points, and I would like to highlight one of them. This is an ongoing problem. It has been going on long before the pandemic even began. And like Ms. Carla Torres said, it's just being highlighted even more now. And this is literally a problem that's weeded within the community that we need to take steps to take out. And you had so many good points, and I really appreciate that. So thank you so much.
The great opportunity is that there's a lot of solutions, and you have a lot of resources, and all we need is creativity and imagination. That's what has always happened, even there.
The community has come together many times before, and I have no doubt that we can do it again to help these people that are very deserving of it. So, you know, that's the next plan. That's the next plan. So, next up, we have Ms. Rosanna Alvarez, who is also a community advocate. Thank you for being here today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you for having me. Rosanna Alvarez here. I am a parent. I've been a Gilroy resident for about 13 years now. I lost track of time, and was also a part of the organizing effort to make sure that the Ochoa camp had access. And in my own frustrations as a parent and as a college instructor working from home, it's an issue of infrastructure, sure. And I think several of the folks on this screen spoke toward that end. It's also an issue of equity and inequity, to be more precise. And while I'm very hopeful that many of the folks on screen and off have been doing so much sweat equity work and intellectual work and hitting the pavement in their tennis shoes with a mask on to make sure that we're doing what we can to get folks connected, the reality is, until we're willing to have those difficult conversations about inequity that include issues of racial justice that are right for the times, that infrastructure will always be at a deficit. Our attitudes towards the solutions themselves will always lack in creativity if we're not willing to push through that. And so I am grateful that the folks on this screen have taken those steps throughout the past year. And I would like to stay hopeful. And at the same time, there is a part of me that feels like I'm constantly holding my breath as I'm holding space with community, because the same issues that were frustrating us a year ago weren't new, and they haven't gone away. And now we've got a lot of folks with outdated equipment And that might be a resource issue, but again, we are in Silicon Valley, and that should be a non-issue for where we are, not just regionally, but nationally and globally. And so we're dealing with the reality of where we are and where we've been, and we're putting our collective minds and strategy there to think about what we need to do next. What we need to do next is going to require us to do something different from what we've already done. So going out there and giving folks hotspots and Chromebooks and presuming that the folks who don't have access, it's an educational issue. It could be in part, but in large part it's not. It's an issue of infrastructure. And anecdotally, as someone who had the means to pay extra for what I thought would be better internet and end up with the same frustrations after having invested not only in the service, but in the equipment to have a technician come to my home, not very far from City Hall, and tell me, I'm new to this area and I have not seen this type of wiring since we got rid of it in Compton. That should be telling of where we need to move and where we need to push and how urgent this is going to be, because we're a year in. And yes, there has been progress. Yes, I am thrilled that politicians, advocates, community folk are taking this seriously because it impacts all of us. But we've also seen that there's an increased expectation that folks should somehow magically have access. Dr. Gordo and her decades of research just reminded us, it's an issue of how you access your medical records. It's an issue of how you book your appointments to save your life. So it's no longer just about education, but education is so critical to everything that we do. And how we harm or help our children in this moment and the youth of today is going to have ripple effects moving forward. And so it's in our best interest collectively, regardless of where we fall. And you can't even say an issue of zip codes in this town, but what intersections are closest to you, right? The infrastructure needs to match. It can't just be, we prioritize the folks who have in the new development while we get to the other areas when we get to them. That is not acceptable for so many different reasons that are much more compelling than what a lot of us were willing to hear before. And so again, that mountain is steep. There are solutions, there are strategies. We've seen glimmers of some things that keep me hopeful. And the hope is that, we know that what we've been doing is working a little bit. There's room to do more of that. And there's opportunity to be so much more innovative for the sake of our collective humanity, because at this point, it's not about a divide. If we choose to move forward, we're willfully accepting that we're participating in a digital segregation way of existing. And from what I can tell in the communications leading up to this town hall and the meetings is that everybody here is asking for something different to happen, is asking for more of us to pay attention and to not feel like we're back to broken, we're back to reopening, and all of a sudden these issues disappear. If anything, it's more pressing and urgent than what we could have ever imagined before we even had to navigate this harrowing landscape. And it's a time when teachers are exhausted, leaders are exhausted, and still we got to keep pushing, right? So thank you for letting me break into this space today and really ground us in where we are and where we've been and the hope that we have to really put our collective hearts and minds in action relentlessly so that we can do right by all of our citizens in all parts of our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosanna, for being here today and highlighting so many points. Like mentioned before, this is definitely an issue we can fix. We need to put our foot down, whether it's the youth leaders in the community, whether it's people from the Santa Clara County Board of Education, whether it's executive director of the Mount Madonna YMCA. There are so many people here with power that can put their foot down. And as a community, we need to do that in order to support the people who need it the most. So thank you for your words and everybody leading up till now. Next speaker, we have Trustee Peter Ortiz with the Santa Clara County Board of Education. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for everyone who's here, everyone who's spoken, and especially and most importantly to our youth leadership. You truly are the future and your voice is instrumental to this cause. So please know that you are heard and your leadership is very much appreciated and respected. As mentioned, my name is Peter Ortiz, and I have the honor of serving on the Santa Clara County Board of Education, representing East San Jose. And I'm also honored to be the chairman of the Joint Legislative Advisory Committee for the county office. And I'm proud to share that our Joint Legislative Advisory Committee has made digital equity and bridging the digital divide one of our top priorities for this legislative cycle. We have seen firsthand how the pandemic has impacted our families truly across the county, and believe that all students should have access to the internet and the devices that are necessary to, one, of course, access their education, but not just education, it's also health, and for the purpose of accessing social services. Right now, during the height of the shelter in place, where we weren't meeting with individuals in person and places were closed, if you did not have access to internet or a working device, you were disconnected from several of our societies and our county's direct services. And that's just absolutely unacceptable. Nearly all schools and colleges switched to distance learning in spring of 2020, creating an unprecedented demand for internet at home, particularly in households with multiple users who may have not been all using the internet at once. Despite major efforts by school districts, different cities, and the county to increase availability, many low-income students still did not have reliable internet access by the fall. And according to a statewide survey, half of California parents were highly concerned about their ability to provide a productive learning environment at their home for their students. Getting laptops and Chromebooks in the hands of students has been an easier task. Making sure they have Wi-Fi and the bandwidth to meet the needs of distance learning has been a whole other challenge. School districts, in partnership with the city and county, have ordered hotspots, smartphones, and other access points to try and meet this demand. However, as pointed out by previous panelists, this solution, it's not just about giving devices to students, and nor is these one-off local efforts a sustaining model to address the digital divide statewide. Cell phone and internet providers have been enjoying the good fortune during this crisis on the backs of our families and our public school districts. While some providers have made minimal efforts to help students with access, they continue to fall short in their willingness to actually address the systemic issues that have caused the divide. It's not about, like I mentioned, simply providing devices or hotspots. It's about establishing a state broadband infrastructure that works for all. The digital divide is both a rural and urban issue. It is no secret, that communities like East San Jose, downtown, rural areas like Gilroy and Morgan Hill have been impacted greatly by the digital divide. The lack of internet access and web devices have put our communities at a great disadvantage in comparison to others, and have had truly exacerbated, the prevalent inequities that already existed within our society. Like people mentioned earlier, the digital divide didn't just appear when COVID-19 and the pandemic started. It was something that existed and only was exacerbated by the overall shelter in place. Our state cannot be left behind in addressing this effort. In April, the governor of New York signed legislation establishing the first in-nation program to provide affordable internet to low-income families. This year, California can make history by being the largest state in the country that offers free broadband access to all. But we can't wait and hope for a hero or a knight in shining armor to come and rescue us. We need viable and useful solutions that work now. And there needs to be a state solution. Local solutions are great in effort. However, depending on what agency leads the effort, they pose the threat of leaving a portion of the population behind. Whether the solution is putting a bond on the November 2022 ballot to fund a new broadband infrastructure for underserved communities, or establishing a great state grant program that funds the construction of new broadband networks in these same areas that lack universal internet access. The only unacceptable answer to this problem is not having an answer and continuing to fail our students. For the internet providers who are standing in the way of closing this divide, shame on you. For putting corporate profits over the best interests of our children and our families. We cannot allow these robber barons to exploit our communities any longer. We demand that you step aside and call on the state to do what's right and hold these bad actors accountable. Thank you. Once again, my name is Peter Ortiz. I'm grateful to be here. Thank you for organizing this.
Thank you for that insight. That insight from a point of view of an administration member. It's nice to see what you guys have been doing to help this and just how that's been working. So thank you. First, we have Council Member Rebeca Armendariz. Thank you for being here today, Council Member. The floor is yours.
Hi there. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll start in Spanish, and I think it gives me enough time to do, I think I have enough time to do it in English also. Buenas tardes a todos. Gracias por sus palabras, y para los que tomaron acción, mis respetos y mis gracias por la motivación que tienen para en verdad servir las familias nuestras que siempre están dejado al último, ¿verdad? Y como dijo la compañera Carla, aprendimos en una manera más difícil que hasta los que están encargados y los que les pagan para proveer y hablar para las familias que no tienen voz o que tienen retos en levantar la voz, los dejan atrás. Y los que más necesitan siempre los dejan atrás. Y aunque uno tiene ese don o ese cargo de ayudar a esas familias, no lo hicieron. Entonces nos juntamos como una comunidad de las agencias no lucrativas, como líderes elegidos y como miembros de la comunidad activistas. Nos juntamos para asegurar que esto no vuelve a pasar, que la infraestructura está en su lugar, que los fondos están allí y que el sistema que asegura que los que están encargados de arreglar esto y asegurar que los niños tienen lo que necesitan, que esa contabilidad esté allí. Así las familias no sufren, los niños no sufren, ya que ya están enfrentando bastantes retos como familias migratorias, como campesinos, como siendo de una familia con bajos ingresos que no tiene los recursos o oportunidades que a muchos otros niños estudiantes tienen. Entonces, a lo menos deben de tener el acceso al internet y un camino, unos pasos a la igualdad. Porque en verdad los niños, los estudiantes no tienen el tiempo, no tienen las oportunidades, no pueden recuperar esas oportunidades, ese desarrollo, mientras que la burocracia da su vuelta, ¿verdad? Mientras que el proceso de los políticos se hace, porque sabemos bien que ellos tienen el interés nomás en otro lugar, no tienen el interés sincero en ayudar a nuestras familias. Entonces, aparte de eso, también aprendimos que que les falta el interés a esos políticos, aunque sean de nuestra cultura, aunque tienen apellido hispano, eso no quiere decir que necesariamente tienen la motivación a ayudar a esas familias más necesitadas. Pero aunque ellos son quien son y tienen sus intereses y sus prioridades mal, nosotros vamos a continuar a empujar y a jalarlos y llamarles la atención cuando se necesita, asegurar que los líderes que sí tenemos son los que van a estar luchando para la igualdad. Y si no, si es algo que ellos no quieren hacer o no pueden hacer, entonces vamos a estar listos nosotros para reemplazarlos con líderes que sí van a hacer eso, que sí van a representar a todas las familias de su distrito, de su área y que más lo necesitan. So I'd just like to say thank you, and well, good afternoon first, and thank you to everyone for their passionate words, and especially those who took action to serve our families, especially those families who are too often left out. Like Carla said, we learned the hard way that even those who are charged with and paid for providing and speaking up for our families that are on the margins, both figuratively and physically, they too often drop the ball when it comes to providing for those of our families who need it the most. And so as community and nonprofit and elected leaders, we had to come together to make sure that something was being done. And now I'm very proud to be part of this coalition to make sure that it doesn't happen again, that the infrastructure is in place, that the funding is in place, and that the checks and balances within those systems and agencies that are supposed to take care of this are also in place. Because our families, the children who already face all these tremendous challenges as migrant farm workers, being low income, so that they can have at least some semblance of equal footing, if not a path towards that equal footing in at least this way. They don't have the time, our youth don't have the time to remediate all that they have lost in terms of education, opportunities, creative development, etc., while the slow wheels of our bureaucracies turn. We also learned that there's a lack of political appetite at the local level to help these families, that despite the culture or last names of some of our elected leaders who are charged with making sure that this kind of stuff doesn't happen, they don't necessarily have the motivation to truly help. And so I know a lot of the compañeros on this call will continue to push and pull, will continue to call out and show up to make sure that the leaders that we have do strive for equity. They look at everything through that lens. And if they don't, then we will be looking to put leaders in those seats that do. Thank you all. Thanks again.
Thank you, Councilmember Armendariz, and thank you to everyone who was able to speak today. All of you guys had different insight and different perspectives, different point of views, and a lot of very helpful words. I hope that everyone watching this today and everyone who gets the opportunity to watch it really deeply thinks about how big of an issue this is and how deep-rooted it is within the community, and how in order to fix it, we do have to come together as a whole, and we need to do it soon. ASAP, because again, Dr. Gordo mentioned, this is an issue that's been going on for a long time, and I definitely think it's right around time to start speeding it up. We should have fixed this a long time ago, but hey, let's move on and fix it now. Zach, would you like to open up the floor to questions if we have time?
Sure. So we have a couple of attendees. If you would like to speak or ask a question, just please raise your virtual hand and I'll allow you in to talk. And while we're waiting for that, you can also put a question in the Q&A and use the chat feature if that's good for you as well. So we'll give that 1 second here. And then what we can do too is we can allow a second round. If there's anybody that wants to close out, we certainly have time for that. We have about 5 more minutes. And for those that are watching this video afterwards, this is being recorded, and you'll be able to either find it on my my website through YouTube. It's going to be made available to the panelists here as well to be able to share it on their platforms. So we hope that this conversation will continue and can continue offline as well. So we don't have any questions popping up. So Arpinder, I'll turn it back over to you, and you can see if there's anybody else who wants to speak, and then we can wrap it up.
I saw Claudia unmute there for a second a while ago, so Claudia, you have some words.
I think fundamentally, I shared that as a nurse, our nonprofit clinics pivoted very quickly to offer telehealth to our communities. And so many of our families were not able to access those services. So I think we're going to have a sort of pandemic after the pandemic, because many of the families that were disconnected to so many services were not able to access them because of the digital divide. So this is not a matter of the luxury of getting online to purchase items. This is a life and death imperative, and we are united in this community to put a face to what this inequity is exacting upon our communities. If you want to know what this does, visit the migrant camps, visit those families that were the first responders who risk their lives every day to put food on our table, who are in the fields, who are in the fast food industries, and they go home to be victims of this digital divide. So we're united to say enough is enough, and this is absolutely unacceptable. So thank you for this opportunity and your leadership, Councilman Hilton.
And if I could, simply because you do speak both to the tangled situation of what we're going to see post-pandemic when we actually finally get there, because we're still in transitional phase, right? And a lot of us, when we talk about the digital divide, we're thinking about the infrastructure, we're thinking about the equipment, we're thinking about the connectivity. And there's also the piece of, well, what happens next because of what we didn't do in that time? And that includes mental health supports, that includes youth. I don't want to call it intervention because that never felt like a fitting phrase, but youth advocacy, support, leadership. What faces, what voices are we welcoming into spaces like this? What type of outreach does it take to truly do right by our communities? And ultimately, putting our egos aside and saying, okay, we did what we could when we thought we were doing what needed to be done. And now we know better and we can do better. And the kids deserve better and our communities demand better. And so now is the time to put our egos aside, past this idea that we've somehow personally failed, because now it's really a choice. Are we going to continue to actually personally and collectively fail, or are we going to do differently? And I think that's going to be my ongoing reminder, right? Is that there is so much to untangle by way of what we're all going to need past this moment. Our community was hit with the mass shooting before the pandemic. We see communities now being hit, some of my communities where I grew up in at the same time, and that speaks to an ongoing unmet need that is not just and adjacent, it's a part of that digital divide. And so also thinking more openly, creatively, equitably about what issues we're involving when we talk about digital divide moving forward, because the old conversations are outdated. Technology moves quick, and I think our brains were created to move a lot quicker, and we forgot that somewhere in there.
Thank you for that, Rosanna. I really appreciate it. And I know everybody else here does too. We have a question. Does Ochoa now have complete access for the upcoming school year? Or the upcoming school year? Carla, would you like to answer that? I know you're the one who touched mostly on these camps. So if you have any insight about that.
I mean, that is the good question, right? I would ask that question to the school district who is supposed to be offering those services, you know, and I would ask if they have prepared and contacted every parent, and not the way that it happened last time. But going back to, you know, my colleague here, Council Member Armendariz, is the accountability to the people in charge. Have they contacted every family? Have they, and when we say contacted, not just make a phone call and check a box, but really go out there and double check. We can go out there and double check because that's what we will do, but whose responsibility is that, right? And who gets paid to do that work? But we'll go out there, you know, and then just to make sure, because, you know, this is our community and we want to make sure that everyone, you know, does have access, and that, because we know that inequity is still there. So great question. Let's find out.
I want to not disrespect anybody, but I want to put note that when we say pivot, that's just another word for not having no plan.
I'm sorry, I can't hear her.
Can you hear me?
Now I can.
I want to just, you know, like remind us, like the baseline that we're working from, like has been stated. When I hear the word pivot, I want to tell you that's just another word for we have no plan, you know. And you know, I'm a scholar, I'm an urban planner. I study this because that was the question. What about the people who are disconnected? What about the poor people? Because it has been stated, the root of this problem is poverty, it is inequality, it is racism, and it is profit. The effects are the same, without intentional, planned action, you know. But, you know, this is what we're finding now. It is a constitutional violation of equal rights. And we're seeing people doing what I predicted would happen over a decade ago. They're suing on behalf of the people because they're violating their equal rights. We have to caution, like has been stated, deficit thinking, biased thinking. We know very well the reason why we're having this conversation is because there's infrastructural, human-based, institutional obstacles to be able to connect. We know that. We know that. So we know that this is already a problem. So why is that? Well, this is a civil rights issue, you know, and it begs for a public utility policy for the state of California. So I ask you, I beg you, youth, to go ahead and ask for that, because we're just prolonging and delaying the problem. So I want to say too, let's put that down, this continuous proposition that we can depend on the youth to teach their adults. Just like the adults have found out, teaching their children is not the same, or that they're capable of doing. Resource and not. There's something to teachers and teaching. In the same way, we cannot rely, though we do want to encourage the youth to share their knowledge as best and as patient as they can, because that's the only thing that facilitates learning sometimes, or you don't want to harm somebody. You might step into, you know, reinforcing this problem, this myth that people cannot learn. Okay, so I want to say that we need to create the spaces for adults as well, to be able to learn at their pace, in their language, by people who understand them and can relate the experience, which is where it takes a lot of creativity. Part of my research is what's the pedagogy for teaching technology with a new language, a new functionality, in ways that people can understand in Espanol or other languages, Punjabi, Chinese, whatever language exists there that requires understanding. See, so we need community, at least community technology development center, to take into account that this isn't something that we can rely on the youth, because that's just comparable to what we've been trying to avoid, having children having to intercede between parents, like bilingual education on issues they cannot and should not shoulder, like health, life-saving issues with telehealth. When a family's already stressed by some illness that is going to kill their mom, their salvation or survival, I don't know. We understand these problems when you're, connected to the community. They're telling us, they're showing us. So please go ahead, join the network of other leaders in the state of California and Los Angeles, and the California superintendent who's saying so. Let Gilroy represent that need. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doctor. I see Councilmember Armendariz has something to say, so would you like to add on to anything?
Thank you. I was just going to add to what Carla said, in that there was such a tremendous irony, and I think it was lost on our school district and even our previous city council, in that the outreach that they did to the farm workers, to the migrant families over at the Ochoa camp, was via email, right? And even if they made phone calls, if you are in a space, a physical space where there's no internet connection, then your smartphone isn't going to work, right? And you're definitely not going to be able to get your email. And if you work in farm labor, you're out before the sun rises and you're home after the sun sets. And so the time that you have to answer phone calls or look at your email, or try to do it at work, like, it's just unreasonable, and it is shameful that nobody stopped to think about the situation that the families are living in, and how to be communicated to. And so I appreciate the emphasis on accountability and on the structures and of communication that are really needed, right? Just a little bit of extra effort, just a little bit of extra effort to talk to these families. You know, there's plenty of volunteers, there's plenty of people in the community, and there's plenty of resources to get to them if the effort is made, if the connection is made to get over that digital divide. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. This reminds me about something that Rosanna said, where we need to be creative and we need to find creative ways to reach out to these camps and reach out to these seniors and reach out to these students and these families. And like Carla and Councilmember said, it's a struggle reaching out to them sometimes. So that just means we need to find more ways. We need to put our thinking caps on, whether it's the youth doing it, whether it's everybody collectively coming together and doing it. Regardless of how hard we have to try, we need to find a solution, and soon. Zach, do you have anything else to say? Does anybody have anything else to say?
All right, well, thank you everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And like I said, you can find the letter that we're going to be sending to CPUC in the beginning of this town hall that Arpinder wrote. You can find that online. We'll look to find a way to connect that with this video. And thank you for joining us, everybody.
Thank you, Councilman, and thank you to the youth and all of my
Yes, thank you,
peers.
Zach. Thank you, Councilmember.